Hello everyone, this is Pablo from the C# Academy, and this is the app that we're going to be building today. It's a very simple coffee ordering system where the users are able to communicate with the console application using their voice. So we say the name of a product and the product gets added to the order. For this, we're going to be using Azure Language AI Services, more specifically the Speech Recognition service, and a C# library called Spectre.console, which helps us enhance console applications. This tutorial is not advanced, it's for beginners in AI with Azure and C#, but it's definitely not suited for absolute beginners in C#. So if you don't have any previous experience with C#, you'll find a link to a tutorial for absolute beginners in the video details below. You'll also find some resources to dive deeper into some concepts that were mentioned in this tutorial. And don't forget that you can slow me down or speed me up using the YouTube controls. This tutorial is quite fast-paced, but you can always pause me and go back and rewatch, and we will also provide the source code below. Have fun, and I hope you enjoy it. For this tutorial, we're going to use Azure AI Language Services. For this, you need to have an Azure account. So if you don't have an account yet, you can find a link in the video's details below. Just bear in mind that it's mandatory to provide your credit card details, but that doesn't mean that you're going to have to pay anything. As long as you delete your resources every time you create them, you'll never get charged. Once you log into the portal, you need to find Speech Services, and you're going to see a list of services. I already have one, but yours should be empty, and you'll need to click on Create. Then you need to use your resource group and choose a region. I'm going to choose US, since most people watching this tutorial will be from the US, but you can choose whatever region you want. You have to choose the region that makes the most sense for your clients. Then you have to pick a name, and you should choose the free tier. Then we'll click on the Review Create button, and then on Create. That will take you to this deployment in progress page. And once it's complete, you can click on Go to Resource, and you'll be able to see your service. And copy and paste the first key and the location onto a notepad. And that's it. Your service is created, and we are ready to use it in our application. So let's create our project in Visual Studio. You need to click on Create a New Project and choose Console Application. Then I have to choose a location. And I'm going to give it a very specific name so that I can easily visualize what it's about. And since our solution will have just one project, we can leave this box ticked, and we will choose to have top-level statements, which is the modern way of doing things. Once the project is created, we need to install two NuGet packages. So you can click on Tools and NuGet Package Manager, and let's start by finding Microsoft.cognitiveservices.speech. And Spectre.console, which we'll use for enhancing our UI. With these two installed, we're going to create a record that will represent the products. Remembering that records are a very lean way to create immutable data objects, and since we don't plan to change our products, it's a perfect use case for records. So our record will have three properties: the ID, which will be an integer, the name, which is a string, and the price, which is a decimal. Then I'm going to copy and paste a pre-prepared list of products, which in our case will be coffee products. And we're going to have a method that will show this list of products. This method can be void, since it doesn't return anything, its only purpose is to show the products. And in this method, we're going to use the table class from spectre.console's namespace. So let's bring in this namespace with a using directive. Then we need to add the columns that we want for this table. And I can choose to pass a string into the add column method, and this string will be the header for that column. Then for each product in my products list, I will add a row to this table. And this row takes strings as arguments. Each string will correspond to a cell in the table. So we're going to have two strings, one for the name and one for the price. And with the price, I'm calling the toString method and formatting it with a C string, which represents currency. So in line 19, I'm calling this method. And I had forgotten to delete this hello world write line. So let's do that now. And I also need to call the console.write method, passing the table so it gets printed. So let's run the app. And the table is printed correctly. So let's create a new method so we can get the order from the user. I'm calling this method getOrder, and it can be void as well. And now we can start working with the actual speech recognition classes. So first I'm going to create an instance of the speech config class and store it in a variable called config. And I do that by calling the from subscription method, passing the key and the region that we grabbed from Azure earlier in this course. And although this is not good practice, I'm going to hard code everything here since I'm going to delete this service after this tutorial. But obviously, if you are actually building an app that's going to be out in the world, you should never hard code secrets. Then we'll create an instance of the speech recognizer class with a using statement, which is the best practice when we're dealing with a resource that needs to be disposed of. The using statement takes care of that for us so that we don't need to manually dispose of this resource. This class will give us the possibility to collect our speech using our microphone. So let's store in a variable the result of speaking to the microphone. And we can see here when we take a peek into the methods and properties of this recognizer class, some of its capabilities. So it has recognize once, speech recognition, continuous recognition, keyword recognition, stop keyword recognition, and so on. It's always good to have a look at the methods since they represent actions that can be performed by the class. So here I'm storing this result, but as the method name says, this returns a task. So it's an asynchronous method. So to make sure that we call and use this method asynchronously, let's use the await keyword, which means that we need to make our method, instead of void, return a task. You never want to have an async void method, and you can find an article about that in the show notes below. And here we're going to use an if statement. The first block of this if statement will be accessed if the reason for this result, which means that the result was generated for this particular reason. So if we got a result because the speech was recognized, and for that comparison, we use this result reason enumeration. So if speech recognized, we're going to print the text property in this result. But before we test that, let's just make a few more modifications. When we call this getOrder method, we need to show the products to the user so that we let them choose which product they want. So we're going to call the showProducts method inside the getOrder, and then ask the user which coffee they want using a console.write line. also the user needs to have the opportunity to order more than one product. So we need to put the logic of the get order method inside a loop. So for this, let's create a boolean called continue ordering, which is initially set to true. And this boolean will be the criteria for the loop to keep running. And we'll put all the code in this method inside this loop. And for now, if the speech that's recognized starts with stop, the boolean will be set to false, which means that we'll exit the loop and the application will close. And obviously we need to call this method, and since it returns a task, we need to await. This method is in a loop. It will keep running since this method doesn't allow us to add a timer or another way to wait for the user's answer. And you can try that on your own, but I had pre-recorded this video. So I had said cappuccino and Americano and all of that, and it picked up all of these words. So we can see that the speech recognition works. It does identify what I'm saying with precision. And when I say stop, the loop stops running. But obviously the application still doesn't work well. We're still not adding our coffees to a list of orders, and we don't have a lot of control over this loop and over the application in general. So let's make this app a little bit closer to a real life app. So what we need to do next is, for every time that the speech gets recognized, so every time we say something, we're going to present a message saying press any key to continue. So the loop is only going to run again after the user presses a key in the keyboard. Then we're going to clear the console and ask the user if they want to keep going with this loop. Then we proceed to collect once again the answer from the user using a different variable, and that is the continue result. So if the speech gets recognized and the text of the speech starts with Y, we're going to set the continue ordering as true. And we're comparing the answer with the letter Y because sometimes the user won't say yes. They can say something like yeah or yeah. So just for this app, we're going to use the letter Y. And of course, I could say any word with the letter Y and it would close the app, but the user doesn't know that. So let's run the app and see what happens. I get asked which coffee I want, and since I don't say anything, we continue within the loop and the message to press any key is presented. I get asked if I want to order something else, and the loop runs again since I said yes. Same thing happened again. I didn't say anything, and I get asked again if I want to order anything else. So that yes or no logic is working. Let's move on. On the top part of our loop, let's remove this configuration from within the loop. So we're going to put it on top of the get order method. And we'll do the same with the speech recognizer instance. We're going to make it so that we're going to have just one connection for the entire order. And that's because I don't need to have two different using statements or two different instances of this class for the two results, the two times when I'm calling the recognize once async method. Then I'm going to create another loop inside the initial loop, and that is for us to make sure that the product gets recognized. So I'm creating a boolean that will reflect that, a product recognize boolean. And while this boolean is false, we're going to run the code inside the loop. So the first result is going to run inside the loop. And we can remove this block where we check for the stop word. This was just for the initial demonstration of the speech recognizer. And if the speech gets recognized, We're going to run a regex expression. Since the speech gets recognized as a phrase or a sentence, often it finishes the sentence with a dot or a period. So this regex will replace any special characters from the recognized text, including punctuation marks. Then the next step in line 40 is to match the recognized text with one of our products. So we're using the first of default method to grab the first product that's found that matches that text. And the first of default can return null. If null gets returned, that means that no product was matched with the text. But if a product is returned, so if the product isn't null, we're going to add it to our order. So we're going to declare another list of products, which will be the order, since it can have multiple products. So if the selected product isn't null, we are adding it to the orders list. And every time we add a new product to the order, we're going to tell the user what's the total value so far. So let's make that calculation and store it in a variable. And then present a message with the total amount of the order so far. And for this, I'm using string interpolation. Now, in case the product doesn't get identified, we need to provide a meaningful message to the user as well. So we're going to say that the product doesn't exist or the speech wasn't recognized. Then to exit this inner loop, we're going to set the product recognized to true. So next time this boolean gets evaluated, we will exit the loop. And inside this loop, I'm also going to ask the user to press any key to continue so that they have the opportunity to see the message. So let's see if it works. I'm running the app and I'm going to say latte and see if it gets added to my order. And it does. I have the total value plus the message saying which coffee was added to the order. Then it exits the first loop and it tells me to press any key to continue. And I get asked if I want to add another product. I say yes, and it reevaluates the first loop. And since there's no product recognized yet, I'm going to go into that loop. Then I'm going to say espresso and it adds to the order. So it tells me that an espresso has been added and it added to the sum. So the logic to add coffees to the order and to calculate the sum does work as well. So now I'm going to create a method to show a summary when we finish the order. First, we'll have a title saying your order summary. Then I loop through the list of products in the order, showing the name and the price per product. And then another console.write line just for spacing. Now, when I ask the user if they want to continue, if there's no answer, I'm going to present a message saying, assuming you want to continue. And that's just to make the user experience a little bit better so that the loop doesn't restart without the user knowing what's going on. Then I show the order summary, and I'm also going to show a final price. So I'm calculating it in line 80. And then showing the message in line 81 using string interpolation. So let's run the app and test everything. So the logic for the unrecognized speech works, but we're going to remove this console.read key from outside the first loop so that it doesn't keep sending messages in case the user doesn't say anything. Of course, in a real application, we would add a specific message for when the user doesn't say anything. But now, if that's the case, we just ask if they want to continue ordering. And before we continue, we're also going to add a console.read key after the user places an order. Otherwise, they won't see the result. So let's test that. Now I ask for a latte and I have to press a key to continue. I choose to continue. I say something that doesn't exist. I choose to continue. I add an Americano. I choose to continue. I add a cappuccino, my favorite coffee. And when I say I don't want to continue, I see the order summary. Before we wrap it up, let's make a few modifications in the UI and the user experience. So in this part, the modifications will be purely cosmetic. There won't be any new AI features, so feel free to skip it, but I'll just try to make things look a little bit better since we can leverage the Spectre console library. So under the getOrder method, I'm going to create a showGrid method, which will be void. And the purpose of this method is to show a grid that will contain the menu and the current order at all times. So for this, I have to create two methods that will return a panel, which belongs to the Spectre console namespace. So I'm going to store these two panels in two variables. And proceed to create a grid class and also store it in a variable. Then I'm going to add two columns and one row to this grid and pass the columns as arguments for the row. And the next step will be to print the grid. So we're going to use the methods that we currently have. So let's modify the show products so that it returns a panel. And we're also modifying its name so that it reflects what it's going to do. Then in line 99, I'm calling a method that will center this table in the panel. And in line 100 and 101, I'm going to add some color to the column headers. And I'll do the same for the row. So the cells in the row will have some styling as well. Then instead of printing the table in line 108, I'm going to return a panel. And I'm creating this panel with a few properties. And these are styling properties that are pretty self-explanatory. And I'm going to do the same for the showOrderSummary method. I'm going to return a panel and modify it so that it shows the list of orders. So I can copy and paste from the Create Menu panel. And when I recorded this, I forgot to change the for each to the orders list. I'm going to do that later. But the difference between this panel and the menu panel is that we're also going to present the sum with the total price. Everything else will be the same, and you could argue that we could have used just one method. I guess I was a little lazy here. I'll just create an empty line so that we have some separation between the items of the order and the total price. And the object that we'll return is exactly the same as in the previous method. So now that we're showing the order at all times, let's make a few modifications in our getOrder method. First, we have to replace the showProducts with showGrid. And I'm going to give the user the chance to cancel the order or to finish the order when they're asked which coffee they would like. So if they say finish, we're going to add some logic so that we exit this loop. So that happens in line 44. Before we check if the answer matches one of our products, we check if the user said finish. If that's the case, we're going to exit the loop with the break, but we're also changing the continue ordering boolean to false so that it exits the outer loop as well. And since we let the users say finish to complete an order, we're going to remove all of this logic to get the yes or no answer. That's not necessary anymore. But we're going to let the user press a key to continue in case the order continues outside of the inner loop. We can also remove the show summary call. That method doesn't exist anymore. And before we test it, as we said before, we need to modify this list that's being printed inside the create order panel. At the moment, it's printing products, but we need to print orders. And one more modification. If what the user says is matched with one of our products, we don't need them to press a key to continue anymore. So now we can test. It looks much better with some color. And I say cappuccino and it gets added. I say flat white, it also gets added. Espresso gets added. And if I say finish, the your order is complete message is presented. So that's it. We've created a very simple ordering system using speech recognition. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much that can be done with this amazing technology. Stay tuned. There are many more Azure AI tutorials coming. Thanks for watching.